fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday, September 17th, and I am in a hotel room in the beautiful city of Haifa in Israel. Behind me, you can see some lights. See through the window, see lights? That is lights from the industrial facilities in the bay of Haifa. You cannot see because it's nighttime, but if you take a straight line down that way, you will be in Lebanon. That is, during the daytime, you can see the Lebanese border pretty clearly from the window of this hotel room. So this is definitely going to be interesting. The next few days, I don't expect the next few hours, but the next few days are certainly going to be super interesting in terms of what happens here, whether I'm stuck or whether I will be able to come back to all of you guys. All right, I know the audio is a little low. I can increase it somewhat on my side, but just realize that I am purposefully not speaking very loud. I am in a hotel room. Getting choppy, Tessa says. Hopefully it's not too choppy. But it is late. It's 10 o'clock, 10 p.m. here, and I'm in a hotel room, and I do have people probably trying to sleep in hotel rooms next to mine. So I'm gonna try not to raise my voice in spite of me wanting to yell a few times. Also, there's weird shadows that my glasses are creating on my face. I think that would be much better. Let me try to get this to work once in. No, that won't work. Get the lighting better, and then we'll get this on the road. All right. All right, we'll see if that, no, that does not last. Try one more time. If not, I'll give up. All right, we'll leave it like that. All right, so you guys probably have heard the news. We heard about this a few hours ago, but it appears that in Lebanon and in Syria, people associated with Hezbollah, the Lebanese terrorist group, the Shiite, Iranian-supported terrorist group, who had pagers. Remember pagers in the old days? Pagers, beepers? Those pages exploded on them all at the same time. I don't know what the numbers are. Last numbers I saw, we're talking about 4,000 people injured and a handful of people already dead. Of the 4,000 injured, several hundreds are in critical conditions. Hospitals in Lebanon, particularly in the south of Lebanon, where there were a lot of Hezbollah operatives close to the Israeli borders, the hospitals are overwhelmed and they cannot handle the number of people. As I said, this also happened in Syria, where Hezbollah is quite active, and several dozen beepers exploded in Syria as well. Now we can get into speculation about what exactly happened and how this all happened, but and we will, because it's pretty amazing. No matter how they technically did it, it's a pretty amazing phenomenon. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what potentially happened. Again, speculation, but emphasize just incredible intelligence achievement that this is. I want to talk about what this means strategically for what is going on here on the northern border, just behind me, of Israel, and what the prospects are for the next few days in terms of what this could and might lead to. Very hard to tell. Could be within the next few hours. The next stage of this will unfold, but I don't know. I'll speculate a little bit about what the possibilities are there. But let's first. I feel like I need to say something about what a beeper is, because there are probably a number of you under the age of, 40, 50, who have no clue what a beeper is. A beeper is an old technology that basically, you can send the equivalent of a text message, or call this number, or go to this place, something very short, very succinct. On the beeper, you can send it on the beeper. It's pre-smartphones. This is a technology of pre-smartphones. It's a technology Hezbollah used because they, in an attempt to try to go around Israel's incredible capabilities of deciphering cell phone messages and smartphone messages. So beepers are considered a more secure method of communication because they first of all, they don't reveal a lot. They just tell you to call or do or something very simple and short. But also because I think they're just harder to hack, or it's a different. Maybe they're easy to hack, but it's a way to get around the fact that Israel and the United States have incredibly sophisticated means by which to listen in and to decipher messages on cell phones. So Hezbollah, one of its mechanisms by which to get around the technological superiority of the Israelis I saw a headline in a newspaper for a few months back, Hezbollah is heavily invested in beepers in order to get around Israel's ability to monitor them. That didn't work out too well. So I guess Hezbollah operatives and anybody affiliated with Hezbollah has a beeper that gives them instructions. These are primarily senior people within Hezbollah, so I don't know if junior people have the beepers. These are senior people who have the beepers. It is interesting, I find, maybe you find, that the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon had a beeper, one of these exploding beepers. In other words, a Hezbollah beeper. So, unsurprising, we all know that the Iranian government ultimately runs Hezbollah, and that the ambassador is probably part of the network, and he needs to be involved, and he needs to be engaged. So the whole beeper thing or pager thing is a security addition, a way for the Hezbollah to be more secure, for terrorists generally to feel more secure, maybe not so much anymore. So what was done here? Now, it's hard to tell. The speculation I'm seeing online is that the phones were injected with a compound called PETN, and that this is a compound that has explosive capabilities. Note that it's not clear that these pagers have lithium batteries. They might have just regular batteries. There's a lot of speculation about lithium exploding batteries. You're not supposed to take them on a plane, things like that. But lithium batteries usually burn; they don't explode. So there had to be an explosive device here. Also, it does appear that the explosion happened in a particular direction, so it was directional. It wasn't just explosive, and partially this explains why people who stood next to the person with the beeper, there are videos of this, didn't get hurt. The explosion went into the body of the person carrying the beeper. So it's some kind of directional explosion. And it was somehow triggered remotely. Now, if you take that all into account, Okay, so these are all new beepers that the only ones that exploded are new beepers, not old beepers. These are beepers that Hezbollah recently purchased. They within the last 6 months, and they arrived and they were distributed by Hezbollah. So one question is, which I think is really important, why now? Why now is an important question, and we can talk about it, but there's some speculation this is an accident. It wasn't meant to be now. It sounds a little dubious, but then the question is really, why now? Why not a month ago? Why not a month from now? And we'll talk about that. And I'm not sure what the answer is. Again, I'll speculate. So this is what Israeli intelligence would have had to do, right? They would have had to know that Hezbollah had placed a large order, 4 pages, with some company, I assume outside of Lebanon, in Europe, let's say. They would have had to be able to get a hold of all these beepers. And it's quite possible that the Mossad, the Israeli equivalent of the CIA, actually created a shell company in a European company to sell beepers. And that they bid aggressively to get the Hezbollah contract. And then they would have to take all those beepers and they would have to inject them with, they'd have to put into the beeper this explosive material that was directional. I don't know how you do that. I have no idea how you do that, but obviously did that somehow. And then they would have to be able to, at some point, update the software on these beepers so that, given a particular signal, something would happen that would cause these things to explode. Let's be very clear. Not a single step in that chain of events is easy. I mean, this might go down as the greatest covert, spy, James Bond-like operation in history. I mean, the complexity, the sheer number, we're talking about, they took out 4,000 Hezbollah operatives, senior people. Now, some of them might have relatively minor injuries, some of them have major injuries, and some of them are dead or dying. One of the things, again, pure speculation, that people have said, is that the beepers beeped 2 or 3 times before they exploded, which was to encourage the person to take the beeper from his belt or from his pocket and put it in front of his face. And then the explosion happened. And supposedly there were a lot of people coming to hospital with facial injuries and with abdomen injuries, holding it low and exploding into the stomach, and of course also hip, groin, who knows. 4,000 all at once. Just, and think about this, and this is, here's a tweet David Deutsch tweeted, which I think is right on. I mean, it's perfect. David Deutsch, the Oxford, what is he, a philosopher? I'm not sure how to categorize David Deutsch, but this is what he wrote. This is his response to the BBC story about 1,000 hurt by exploding pages across Lebanon. He says, if this is true, it is the most scrupulously moral mass casualty attack in the history of urban warfare. Because think about it. They just killed 4,000 terrorists in an urban environment, probably hurting very few civilians, if any, we'll see. Maybe some got hurt, but very few. They took out 4,000 targeted, it's as if each one of them had a little missile with their name on it, targeted, and no civilian casualties in a densely populated urban area. And, that's just stunning. It's a stunning achievement. And, Deutsch means moral in the sense that there were no collateral damage, no civilian casualties. And, I'm not sure, exactly, we need to think about how to categorize it morally. But, yeah, this is amazing. Again, before we get to the strategic significance of this, and we'll talk about that. There's a number of issues here regarding the strategic significance. It's, again, I want you to think about the scale of this thing. The scale of this thing. And the planning. And the brilliant execution. Hezbollah had no clue. Had no clue this was happening. By the way, just today, about the same time as this story broke, another story broke. One wonders if the coincidence. The other story was that the Israeli Internal Security Forces discovered a plot to assassinate in Israel a former general in the Israeli army. Hezbollah plot. They had recruited people in Israel, and they were going to do it in a park. The Israelis uncovered the plot, arrested the people, showed the explosives they were going to use, all of that. So I don't know if this is a message to Hezbollah or not. I don't know. But just so you know, this happened today as well. But the scale of this is astounding. It's astounding. And I don't know, it puts a smile on my face. I mean, right now there are 4,000 terrorists in hospitals bleeding. That's a good outcome. That's a good day. As Troy says, thank you, Troy. Really, really appreciate the support here. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in Brisbane, December 6th to 8th. He says it's a feel-good story of the year. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, if you value justice, if you take justice seriously, this is perfect and justified and moral and great, except for, we'll see in a minute, except for, I'll talk about it in a minute, is there a bigger strategy? That's the real question. One of the impacts of this is unbelievably humiliating to Hamas. I mean, they can't make up a story here. They have no internal security. People are vulnerable to Israeli attack, to Israeli assassination in ways that they can't even imagine. What are they going to use next? Pigeons to communicate? I mean, the pigeons could explode, I guess. What exactly are they going to do? This undermines the idea of their success. Now, if you remember when they were about to launch the barrage of missiles towards Tel Aviv a month ago, which Israel destroyed the capacity to do at the last minute, kind of destroyed all their launches. They claim they launched and they killed a bunch of people in this intelligence unit in the center of Tel Aviv, which is a complete and utter lie. There's no lies they can tell here to make themselves look good. This is not just Israel killing one, leading Hezbollah official. This is taking out 4,000 at the same time. Unbelievably humiliating for Hezbollah and the Iranians and the people affiliating with them. And of course, if the Iranian ambassador, if the story about the Iranian ambassador is true, then that will piss off the Iranians, and you can expect the Iranians to now start rattling the sabers. So this, of course, brings up the question of why. Why do this? What's the strategic goal? Yeah, you kill 4,000 terrorists, that's always a good day. Or you injure them or maim them or take them out to commission. But is there some bigger goal here? Here it's hard to tell. Now, right now, just before this happened, there were significant negotiations going on, moderated by the Americans. The Americans have an envoy shuttling between Beirut, Washington, and Tel Aviv, trying to cut a deal. Now, the Hezbollah has made clear they're not interested in a deal. They will only stop shelling Israel. They will only stop the constant missile attacks on Israel when and if Israel stops in Gaza. So Hezbollah has tied its fate to the fates of Hamas and in Gaza. But a deal, supposedly, some attempt at some kind of deal, was being negotiated, although it seems like it was going nowhere. Israel was clearly coming to the conclusion, and certainly both the Secretary of Defense and the Prime Minister and others have been saying this last few days, last month or so, that at some point Israel is going to have to go to war with Lebanon, with the Hezbollah. And we've talked about this. I've talked about this since October 8th. Push Hezbollah north of the Litani, potentially even further north, and dismantle or destroy Hezbollah's capabilities of attacking Israel. There's a huge risk there. Hezbollah has 140,000 missiles. Now, most of them are short range, can't do a lot of damage, but some of them are long range, and certainly many of them are within Haifa range. And one of the things you can't see, the lights behind me, that is the Bay of Haifa. This is an industrial area. This is where refineries are. If you dropped a bomb in there, it would cause a lot of damage, and I'm sure it's heavily protected with anti-missile defense systems. So Israel is coming to the conclusion it needs to invade Lebanon. So it could be that this is so humiliating to Hezbollah, is so shocking and so deflating to them, that they basically rethink their position vis-a-vis Gaza and are willing to negotiate and are willing to establish some kind of ceasefire. It's possible. Israeli television seem to be speculating this is one of the possibilities. But this is, I think, highly unlikely. Hezbollah doesn't usually think in those terms. It's stuck on this issue of, false pride, and they've been attacked, they need to attack back. Even if they have to lie on efficaciousness of the attack, they have to at least posture. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the next move is by Hezbollah. But so one issue is this is pressure on them to compromise in the negotiation. Another possibility is Israel just did this to slap Hezbollah, to penalize them, to punish them. But there's no goal beyond that. That would be pretty pathetic if that were true. Because what they just did is perfect for the next option I will present, which I find it mind-boggling. This is not what's going to happen, but I doubt that it's going to happen, although I think we'll find out tomorrow morning. I mean, think about it right now. Right now, Hezbollah, particularly the senior leadership in Hezbollah, is panicking. Right now, many of them are in hospitals. Some of them are dead. This is true of Hezbollah in South Lebanon, where the missiles are. This is true of the Hezbollah leadership in Beirut. This is true of Hezbollah in Syria. Hezbollah generally is now crippled. They are in disarray. They are panicked. Their leadership and their means of communication have been destroyed. Command and control probably does not exist right now. This is the perfect time. Should be step one. And the next step is tanks in Lebanon. If it doesn't happen, it's mind-boggling to me that it doesn't. Because if Israel went in now, it would minimize its own casualties. It would minimize civilian casualties on the Lebanese side. And there's a good chance that Hezbollah would be so confused and so terrified that they would retreat, and in a lot of their missiles they wouldn't know how to launch because the commanding officers are not there, and there would be massive confusion, and Israel would be able to take large amounts of territory without a fight, or very little fight. I don't know. And to me, this is the obvious next step. And yet, I don't get any sense. I don't get any real sense that that's what Israel is going to do. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out. I mean, this is Netanyahu's, one of Netanyahu's many, This is a real turning point. Is he going to be the coward that he often is, or is he actually going to take the fight to the enemy? You couldn't ask for a better setup. You couldn't ask for a better circumstance. It's never going to get easier. It's never going to be easier to go into Lebanon than right now, tonight, or first thing tomorrow morning, if they want light. Of course, in the dark would be even better. Israel has sophisticated night vision equipment. And I don't know what Hezbollah has. So this is the perfect time to go in. I don't know. I just don't know. Of course, the other option is what some people rumored online are saying. No, that was the plan. The plan was to do this and then invade, but they accidentally set it off and they're not ready. I don't have much to say about that. I don't know. There's no reason to believe that's true. It's still, the whole thing is brilliant, but still, it would be pretty bad if that were the case. But again, I can't think of how you do not take advantage of this particular situation when pretty much everybody in Israel right now seems to be finally in agreement that going into Lebanon is necessary. And the reason it's necessary is a couple of 100,000, I think it's a couple of 100,000 Israeli civilians who live in the north of Israel have to vacate their homes, move into hotels, move to the south, leave their homes, and have now not been able to live in their homes for the last 10 months. And they haven't been able to do this, 11 months. They haven't been able to do this because their homes are in constant barrage of missiles. Not many of the missiles fall, but enough fall to completely disrupt people's lives and put their lives at risk. So they've left. Israel has to be able to protect its own citizens. It's the first responsibility of any government. It has to be able to make the north safe for living in. Israel's never ceded territory like it ceded the north of Israel to Hezbollah over the last 11 months. So making it possible for people to go back to their homes is priority number one, and I think the government realizes that, and most of the elements within the government realize that. The defense secretary agrees, the prime minister agrees, and I think the generals in the army have agreed, and hopefully this is what they will do. The question is, when exactly will that happen? And will it happen tomorrow? Or will they sit on their hands and wait? I'm not sure for what. For the Americans to say, okay? I'm not sure for what. I wonder what the Americans are thinking. I wonder what the CIA is thinking. I wonder how much they knew. And what are they thinking? Like, is the CIA really, really jealous right now? I wish we could do something like that. They saying to themselves? I don't know. I don't know. It's really curious. Is Biden really pissed off because this is another example of the Israelis escalating? When all Biden wants is calm, please calm. Part of this negotiation was to put pressure on Israel not to go into Lebanon until after the U.S. elections. Biden does not want a war in his hands while leading up to the elections. He's afraid that he either pisses off the Arabs in Michigan or he pisses off the Jews everywhere else. And he just would rather deal with it or have Trump deal with it after the election. It's not happening. Anyway, it's quite possible that we will see an Israeli operation into Lebanon in the next few hours. And then it's also a question, if Israel doesn't go into Lebanon, or if it does, what is Hezbollah going to do? I don't think they can do anything in the next day. I don't know when they will be able to do something. They're clearly incapacitated for right now. They're going to have to recover. But they will want to react. And, of course, the way they react is send drones and missiles and everything else into Israel. Now, one of the beauties of what Israel just did is it only targeted Hezbollah people, didn't target civilians. By doing so, it makes it very difficult for Hezbollah, which has been playing this game with Israel and the Iranians, to target civilians. It's military. They'll target military facilities. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the next few days and how it's going to develop. And what the implications are going to be. But again, if Israel preempts, this could go pretty, as smoothly as war could go, as smoothly as something like that could go. Hard to tell. Let's hope Israel is viewing this strategically and is planning strategically, and this is the opportunity they've been waiting for, and this is the opportunity not the opportunity they've been waiting for. This is the opportunity they planned. This is the opportunity they created, and that they are now going to take advantage of that opportunity. And if they don't, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Then Israel's going to need real help, because Israel's much weaker than even I thought it was strategically. Obviously, operationally, look what they just did. Incredible. Strategically, very weak if they don't take advantage of it right now. All right. Now, at the same time, there is major drama happening within the Israeli government. So for a few days now, Netanyahu has been scheming to fire his defense secretary in the middle of a war, I might note, and potentially in the middle of another war. Well, either way, it's a war in Gaza and a war in Lebanon, either way, even with just the missiles and Israel bombing, that's war on war. So he's been, threatening and conspiring to fire his defense secretary. And I can't do that because his coalition is too weak. So he's been talking to another political party within Israel, a political party that spun off from Netanyahu's party, from the Likud, a political party whose leader has been unbelievably critical of Netanyahu for years now, but particularly since October 7th, who actually, just a month ago, basically said that Netanyahu had a huge responsibility for what happened October 7th. He said in front of a commission that's looking into what's going on there. It's a commission, I think, of the parliament that's looking into establishing a commission to investigate October 7th. His name is Yaron Brook. And what it appears to be is Netanyahu is going to bring this other political party into the coalition, strengthen it, bolster it, expand it, replace the current defense secretary, Gallant, with this guy, Sar, who has no experience. And this will bolster his coalition and allow him probably to survive until the elections in 2026. Now, it's hard for me to express how absolutely ridiculous this is. Again, Netanyahu's primary purpose in life is maintaining political power. This is one reason why this whole thing could have been an accident. Because why would you do this at the same time as you're negotiating to fire your defense secretary? Israeli politics are bewildering to all of us. So, I don't know, it's Netanyahu so focused on maintaining power, rather than winning the war in Gaza and winning the war in Lebanon. His primary focus is staying in power, which is shocking and disgusting and disturbing and horrific. And Yaron Brook is from a political party that is very critical of Netanyahu. It's right of center. It's very similar to Likud in terms of its opinions, but very, very critical of Netanyahu, and has been very, very critical of the way the war has been handled. In, I'd say, a positive sense, they thought it should have been handled more aggressively, more strongly, more powerfully. And yet they want to join the coalition now? Why? Power, again. Power corrupts. Politicians are corrupted. I had on my show a member of this political party, Sharren Haskel. I had her on my show in Hebrew. And she was so critical of Netanyahu, and she was so good, and she was so right, and she was so critical of Netanyahu's strategy in Gaza and everything going on. And it's like the idea that she would sell out and now join Netanyahu's government, I don't know, is unthinkable. On the other hand, another politician. It's I don't know. Saar is better probably than Gallant, but Gallant has wanted the IDF to go into Lebanon from October of last year. Gallant wanted a much stronger response to Iran when Iran bombed Israel. Gallant wanted to enter Gaza days before Netanyahu finally agreed to enter Gaza. So yes, he's been weak on these negotiations and willing to compromise the Philadelphia corridor. But on everything else, Gallant has been better than Netanyahu, stronger than Netanyahu, tougher than Netanyahu, more aggressive than Netanyahu. So I'm not sure. I mean, Hillel says, Saar is stronger. Saar is probably stronger, but let's be clear. Gallant has been good. It's Netanyahu that's held back. It's Netanyahu that has prevented the IDF from winning in Gaza. It is Netanyahu that held back the IDF from going into Gaza on October 10th, which is when they should have gone into Gaza. It is Netanyahu that's held back from entering Lebanon. He is Netanyahu's a coward, always has been. A hesitant, undecisive, lack of decisive, gives a great speech, can't make a decision. Yeah, Hillel says someone I know joked about it and said that this is all, the whole operation, the BEPA operation was done by Gallant in order to keep his job. And it's true, Netanyahu's not going to fire him now, just as Israel might be facing a war in Lebanon. But this is politics in Israel. It's in the ways in which it's more the corruption, not the corruption in terms of suitcases of cash, but the corruption in terms of everybody jockeying, positioning themselves for power plays and trying to get more power, is much more explicit and obvious and laid out in Israel than it is in the United States. I'm sure it happens everywhere, but in Israel, it's naked. And you can see it in ways that you can't see it in America. And it's so disgusting, particularly post-October 7th when, the fate of the state of Israel is in these people's hands. Whether Israel exists in 20 years, or 10 years, or 5 years, Iran gets nukes, is in these people's hands. And all they're doing is jockeying for power. Gideon Saar, who's this guy from the opposition, if he's really tough and more offensive, then he should demand Netanyahu should go. He should team up with Gallant to kick out Netanyahu. He should team up with the Likud to get rid of Netanyahu. The obstacle for any kind of sanity in Israel is Netanyahu. But that won't happen. It won't happen. Without Netanyahu, you could actually form a pretty interesting government, a wide-ranging government that includes the center right, center left, even though even the center left is pretty center, and center right people get rid of the religious people, get rid of the religious political parties, and you would have a really interesting coalition that would have a vast majority of Israelis supporting it. And I think in terms of what they actually did, it wouldn't be that different. It would be better than what Netanyahu did. And even though they play the oppositions, again, they have to oppose things that Netanyahu does. Israeli politics is completely nuts. All right. What else do I want to comment on? You know, if there wasn't this story, I'd be talking about the second assassination attempt of Donald Trump by a crazy man. Second one. But I find that story not that interesting. We can talk about Springfield, Ohio more, but we've already talked about it. I don't think there's anything new I have to say. It's pretty crazy. As Akira here says on the chat, he says, I imagine everyone is okay with politicians gambling Israel's existence over there. No, people are freaking out. But people are also, I think to some extent, tribalism is not unique to America. It's affecting Israel. So there's a pro-Bibi side and there's an anti-Bibi side, and there's very little consideration for the facts and the actual issues and actually what's going on. And a lot of it is, well, if Bibi's for it, we're against it. If Bibi's against it, we're for it, or the other way around. There is a lot of that, unfortunately, as well. But it's shocking. It's shocking. I mean, this is existential for Israel. Iran is existential for Israel. They're really existential issues. When Netanyahu gives those great speeches at the UN and in front of Congress, he's absolutely right in terms of what he says in those speeches. If only he lived up to that. If only he actually executed on that. All right, let's see. Let me just scan quickly. I'm going to quickly look at news here just to see if there's anything new on this. Okay, supposedly, according to Axios, I don't know what Axios knows, but they must be talking to somebody. The operation was approved. This operation was approved during a meeting of the Israeli Security Cabinet earlier this week, which was headed by Prime Minister Netanyahu and attended by senior military and defense officials, alongside the leaders of both the Shin Bet, that's internal security, and the Mossad, external security. That sounds right. This is not accidental. Why Netanyahu is negotiating to get rid of his defense secretary, why he knows this is about to happen. Maybe he thought it would fail and he could use the failure to get rid of him. I don't know. But that's Axios is claiming that. It sounds right. So Gallant and Austin, the American Secretary of Defense, are on the phone quite often these days, and certainly I'm sure on the phone today. In terms of Lebanon, I'm sure that Lloyd Austin, if they probably didn't know about this in advance. They want credible deniability. And the other point to note is that Israel right now, as we speak, if I had binoculars, maybe we can actually see some of the explosions. Israel right now is attacking Hezbollah facilities in southern Lebanon from the air. So, but it does that every night. So, but this night is no different in that sense. So they're not letting off on this. So, the U.S. State Department says explicitly the United States had no involvement in today's pager explosion incident in Lebanon, nor were they informed of an operation by Israel or any other actor. Right? There are a bunch of videos online where you could see the pages exploding in people's on people's kind of laps or belts or whatever. So you can actually see this on video. Let's see, what else do we want? I think that's that. We'll keep that news feed open, so if anything changes, we can see it. let's see. All right, so we can go to Super Chat. Before we do that, let me remind everybody that this is a listener-supported show. You guys make this show possible. Couldn't do it without support, financial support from you guys. You can support the show on Patreon, on yaronbrookshow.com/membership, which is through PayPal. And of course, if you're watching live, you can do it with Super Chat, asking a question, shaping the show, getting answers to issues that concern you. And you can also do a sticker, which is just a way of just supporting the show without a question and just showing your support for it. Let me just, that reminds me, let me just thank John for a $50 sticker right off the bat of the show. Thank you, John. Jeff Bannister. Thank you, Jeff. Lucinda Duruski. Thank you, guys. These are all sticker people. We'll get to the questions in a minute. Of course, Troy did the 500 Australian dollars. Thank you, Troy. Really, really appreciate it. Mike Dahl. Thank you. Mary Aline. Thank you. And David Arsenault and Wes Stewart. Thank you, guys, for the stickers. Really, really, really appreciate it, and it's very helpful. I'll also remind you that we have another sponsors. The Ayn Rand Institute sponsors the show. The Ayn Rand Institute is currently recruiting people to come to our conference, Ayn Rand Institute conference in Brisbane, Australia, in December 6th to 8th. You can register at aynrand.org/start here. If you're a student, studying and interested in studying objectivism, and you would like to attend this conference but don't have the funds, you can apply for a scholarship. You can apply again at the same website, aynrand.org/start here, and you can apply for a scholarship even if you're not in Australia itself. Maybe you're in Japan, South Korea, China, Mongolia, Philippines. I don't know. Anyway. You can, here's a Taiwanese, Faku Kastan. He can come as well. And he can apply for a scholarship for the conference in Brisbane. This is the largest conference, Ayn Rand conference, held in that part of the world. And I'm including here that part of the two continents, Australia and Asia. So we've never had a big conference in East Asia. So this is your opportunity to come out. It's not that far. I mean, it's far. But it's not that far. It's not as far as America. Some of the transportation expenses are covered as well. So please consider coming. At least apply, and you'll hear something from the Institute soon. Let's see. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you Australians. I know I have a lot of Australian listeners at the conference. Please come. Please, let me know that you listen to the show. Hopefully we'll have a gathering of Yaron Brook Show listeners at the conference. Brisbane, December 6th to 8th. Yeah. All right. Let's jump in with some of the questions. Michael, wow, Michael did a $100 question and a $50 question. Thank you, Michael. Michael says, we expect bad guys to be bad. It's so-called good guys who are the problem. They're simply not good enough, not smart enough, and not honest enough to keep the bad guys from doing as much damage as they do. We need a far better class of good guys, actual good guys. Yes, I mean, it's absolutely right. And Ayn Rand makes this point. She says, and this is, I think, an important philosophical point, an important point about life. Her point is that evil is impotent. Evil cannot, in other words, bad guys, they cannot produce the means by which they survive. Look at the Soviet Union, look at Mao's China, look at Venezuela. They can't survive. They cannot build the weapons they need if they want to fight. They cannot really do much damage, except for the fact that not only are the good guys weak, but the good guys almost always help the bad guys. Whether it was food shipments from the United States to the Soviet Union, wheat in the 70s, but even earlier in the 20s and 30s, in the early days of communism, America supported the communists. American businessmen supported the communists and made it possible for them to survive. there are plenty of good people, facilitating the evil of Maduro. There are, think about Hamas. Hamas could be destroyed in days. What is holding Israel back? Well, its own perverted moral code. And the good guys fight fair. You remember I used this example in the Westerns, right? In the Westerns, the good guy always insists on a fair fight with the bad guy. But the reality is, bad guys don't deserve fair fights. If you can kill a bad guy by shooting him in the back and avoid dying yourself, or avoid having the bad guy kill other innocents, then you should shoot him in the back. But no, the good guys have a code, and that code gives the bad guy an opportunity to kill. And this is true in war, this is true in all kinds of circumstances in our lives. The good guys grant sanction. The good guys facilitate, make it possible for the bad guys to survive. We sell them technology. We sell them sophisticated chips. We sell them. We don't boycott them properly. We don't fight them properly. We make it possible for them to survive. I mean, Hamas, the only reason it could do what it did on October 7th is because the good guys in Israel, for years, turned their back at Hamas and let them get away with stuff. And allowed money to flow in, and allowed them to build tunnels, and allowed them to do all the things that they did. So yes, I agree, Michael, completely. We need good guys. We need an actual good guys who are willing to stand up for good, for what is good. Okay, Michael says, I don't like when conversations reach a point. Reach a point when parties end up saying agree to disagree. To me, this happens when both parties hold that contradictions exist and nothing else can be done about them, not even a commitment to further assessment. Well, I don't know, Michael. I mean, sometimes you agree to disagree when you recognize the fact that you might still be convinced that you're completely right, and you might be completely convinced that the other party holds a contradiction, but you realize that they're not going to change their minds. You acknowledge that they are irrational, and that there's a sense in which you're wasting your time. So why waste your time? Agree to disagree and walk away. So agreeing to disagree doesn't mean that you agree that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you agree that they have a point. It just means that you have given up on the argument. You've given up on the discussion. You've given up on trying to convince them. And I view that, walking away from arguments, as a rational, good use of your time, because 99% of the arguments we get into, we don't convince the other party. So why are we getting into arguments to begin with? Just wasting our time, our energy, our efforts. So, yeah. Robert said the death toll has risen to 9. I think the death toll will be significantly higher than that, given that several hundred were in critical condition, and given the state of Lebanese hospitals overwhelmed by all this, it's going to be hard to believe that some of them won't die. Again, this is not, I mean, some of the injuries are probably light and they'll probably be able to recoup quickly. This is why I think Israel needs to act quickly. It needs to act now. But I don't know. But we'll see what happens. Robert also says, he's quoting from a news article, a doctor who visited hospitals in Sidon. Sidon is in the south of Lebanon, between the south of Lebanon and Beirut, so it's like in the middle of that section. Visited Sidon, where some of the wounded were taken, said so many people have suffered wounds to their eyes that there is a shortage of eye surgeons. Yeah, as I said, not surprising. If it beeped and they rose it and looked down at the screen of the thing and then it exploded into their face and it damaged their eyes. So that, I think, is consistent with what I've been saying. Yeah, the other thing, I think Akira brings up a good point. I mean, you could also disagree with somebody and you can't convince them and they can't convince you, and you may be not sure exactly why you can't convince them, and you think you're right, but you're not 100% sure you're right. And they're not convincing you, but maybe there's something to the argument. And you could say, you know what, let's agree to disagree. And then you go away and think about it, and you go away and reconsider. So there are lots of reasons to walk away from a conversation without, you're the devil, and I never want to see you again, or continue the conversation forever until you try to convince each other. There's a reason to say, you know, let's agree to disagree right now. You can revisit. You can think about it. You can figure out if you're right or you're wrong. Maybe you're wrong. So I'm not as negative about that term, Michael, as you seem to be. Silvano says, do you think Israel could ever elect a Muslim president? Imagine a pro-war Muslim candidate advocating against Hamas. Could Israel vote for a Muslim candidate? I think if it was the right Muslim, I think it's possible. I don't think it's completely outrageous. Now, Israel, the president is a symbolic function. It's not a decision maker. Could the prime minister be a Muslim? I mean, hopefully the day will come when that is a possibility, yes. Both because the Muslims in Israel will become better, in a sense of less tribal and less committed to a Palestinian cause, and because Israel will embrace them more. I mean, there is an issue in Israeli society about embracing the Muslims who are citizens of Israel. So it's tricky, but it could happen. I wouldn't rule it out, but it's going to be a while, maybe in another 50 years. Partially because think about most of the Muslim society communities in Israel are not quite ready for it. Faku from Taiwan, it looks like. Hi, Yaron. Great show today. It's amazing to have a voice of sanity among so much irrationality going on in the world. I have a huge deal of respect for you for never selling out. Keep up the good work. Cheers from Taiwan. Cheers, Faku. Taiwan, one of the few places, one of the places, kind of few, in the world that I haven't been to, that I would like to go to. One of the few that I haven't been to and would like to go to. That is true. I'd love to go to Taiwan sometime, but never been there. Thank you, Faku. Really appreciate it. David, $100. Thank you, David. I recently heard some news that was very upsetting to me. It was completely out of left field and really threw me off. I'm feeling a lot better now, but wanted to ask you how you deal with very overwhelming negative emotions. God, I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, first of all, the most important thing is not to reject them, to accept that you have these very strong negative emotions. You have to let them, acknowledge them. You have to acknowledge them, not try to suppress them, not try to ignore them, not try to pull them away. And then you really have to think through what is causing those emotions and what's really going on. And, is the negative emotion, in a sense, justified? The emotion is an emotion, but, what are the causes? Is it justified in a sense of its intensity? Is this really as bad news as one expected? And sometimes it is. Sometimes you just have to accept that you feel horrible. And, focusing on the better things in your world, because whatever the news is, it probably hasn't literally ended your world or your life. What are the good things in your life? And then, of course, what can you do to improve the situation, to get out of it, to improve it, to do better? You deal with very negative emotions by experiencing them, embracing that experience, and then thinking about how to basically how to move into a positive space so that your emotions also will adjust, adapt, whatever the word is, right? Now, of course, this is a question much better placed with a psychologist, somebody who deals with this and has the tools to give you actual advice on what to do. But it's tough, and you have to acknowledge, and sometimes you just have to take some time off and say, look, I feel like shit. And there's a reason for it. I got this really bad news, and I have to deal with it, and I have to think it through, and I have to figure it out, and I feel like shit right now, and that's just the way it is. And it's okay to feel like shit sometimes. But the worst thing is to ignore it, to suppress it, to pretend it doesn't exist. That only creates bigger problems long term. All right, let's keep going here with questions. Let's see. Michael says, to be liked is the ultimate aim of the unsuccessful. Well, some unsuccessful, not all unsuccessful. There are plenty of people who are not successful because, they failed. We all fail at some things because things didn't work out, but not because they wanted to be liked. There are plenty of people who failed where the issue of second-handed being liked by other people was not the primary motivation. So I wouldn't say that's always the case. Lucinda, sometimes you also got to agree to disagree because there's some truth you come to know by integrating a lot of experience over a long time. And you don't always have the time or skill to convince someone of that kind of truth. That's true. That's true. Convincing somebody is very different than knowing. Although the better you are arguing for something, the more you know it. But yes, I agree with you completely. So walking away, in other words, from an argument without condemning the other side is really, really important to your own sanity. Michael, he's quoting Karl Marx, quote, accuse your enemy of what you are doing as you are doing it to create confusion. Okay, I'm curious where he wrote that, Michael, where that's written. Michael, does nihilism often take the form of anti-Semitism? I don't know what often means. I don't think one can conflate nihilism with anti-Semitism. I think anti-Semitism is one form of nihilism, and it doesn't always, like Catholic anti-Semitism doesn't strike me as nihilistic. It strikes me as seeking a particular goal, and it has a whole theology behind it. Nazi anti-Semitism is clearly nihilistic. So I think anti-Semitism is not always equivalent to nihilism, and I think there are lots of nihilists in the world. I don't know that Mao Zedong was an anti-Semite. There's no reason to believe he was, and yet a nihilist, the ruler of North Korea. So nihilism, I wouldn't conflate it, and I wouldn't assume that it often takes that case. It sometimes does. In the West, many times. The West that's been influenced by Christianity. It's Christianity's influence that leads to anti-Semitism, in my view. Arum says $10 for this positive news item. Update. Thank you, Arum. Simon, we're running out of questions, by the way. Do aliens exist? Can objectivists believe in aliens? Yes, absolutely they exist. I spoke to one yesterday. I don't know if aliens exist. Ultimately, what you have to say about aliens, I think, is that we have no evidence they do exist. And therefore, to claim their existence is somewhat arbitrary. But there's nothing in reality that suggests that they cannot be aliens. So the existence of aliens doesn't contradict objectivism because it doesn't contradict reality. But I don't know if they're aliens, but given that there's no evidence for them, I just have no opinion. No opinion. So it's not cognition, right? You can present evidence, and they can say, oh, the evidence is good, the evidence is bad, the evidence is false. But right now, there's zero evidence, and therefore, I don't know if aliens exist. I hope they do. I hope they do. Because God, it would be nice to have a, I don't know, more advanced, which means ultimately more rational species out there. Because, human beings are not that impressive. I don't know, at least in terms of consistency. So, and I assume that if they're advanced, they're going to be peaceful, and they're going to want to trade rather than enslave. That they, if they have that kind of advanced technology, they probably know a lot more about us, but they also understand, some pretty basic truths. Andrew says, an objectivist argued that objectivism doesn't allow for providing support to Ukraine. False. Rand supported foreign intervention in delimited instances, and it is in the spirit of objectivism to help countries fight U.S. enemies. Expound. I mean, look, I said this in my talk about Ukraine. I encourage anybody who's got questions about objectivism supporting Ukraine to go listen to my talk on Ukraine and argue with what I say there. But in a world in which the United States is an objectivist country, Russia would never invade Ukraine. It just would not be acceptable. In a world in which the United States was an objectivist country, it would be so rich, so powerful, so strong, so committed to principles. I mean, nobody would challenge us. Really, nobody would challenge us. They'd have to be suicidal. Now, in the world in which we live, in which we're spending gazillions of dollars on all kinds of nonsense, on literally wasting and subsidizing and destroying human lives, the welfare system and business subsidies and Medicare and Medicaid, which is just a massive subsidy to old people, and all of that at the expense of young people, by the way, expense of young people. And Russia is a real threat to our allies, a real threat to our way of life, a real enemy of the United States, and it invades another country. Of course you support Ukraine. You support the people who are standing up to a clear-cut enemy of ours. Now, is the Ukrainian government a great government? No. But it's moving in the direction of the West. It's moving to become better, and they're standing up to real evil. So I don't believe we should put troops on the ground, but what are we doing? We're selling them weapons. We're giving them weapons. Fine. That is an incredible positive that serves American interests. It serves American interests in preventing an evil dictator from establishing success and therefore encouraging him to attack more of our allies and ultimately directly U.S. interests. This is the cheapest way to avoid war, is to support Ukraine. If we don't support Ukraine and Putin succeeds, the war we will get as a result of that will be much, much, much bigger. You should have learned from World War II. You stop them early. The later you wait, the more costly it becomes. So this is cheap. And it's cheap primarily by the measure of American blood. So no, I don't think that's true. The reality is I don't know of an objectivist intellectual who doesn't supporting Ukraine. And I think Ayn Rand would I think Ayn Rand would, but of course I don't know. I mean, Ayn Rand is always surprising, and I don't speak for her. But I believe she would. Otherwise, I believe she would support the U.S. supporting Ukraine. I mean, think about all the foreign aid we give to our enemies. We give a lot of money to our enemies. Not giving money to the people actually fighting the fight for us. And if we'd actually supported Ukraine properly, if we'd actually given them the weapons when they asked for them, if we actually allowed them to use the weapons, This war might be over by now. We have stopped the Ukrainians from actually kicking the Russians out. We did. The Biden administration did. As good as it has been in supplying the weapons, it's been bad in how long it's taken, and it's been bad in how it's limited the ability of the Ukrainians to use those weapons. Lucinda says, every time I've convinced someone of anything important, it's been over a long time and over many discussions. Single arguments haven't led to anything significant in my experience, except a couple of times with close friends. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult. People bring an entire context of knowledge. And particularly when you have something radical to say, most you can do is create cognitive dissonance so that they go and think about it and maybe read a book. But arguments don't convince, books convince. I mean, my hope for those of you who haven't is go read Atlas Shrugged. Go read The Fountainhead. The real argument is there. What you hear from me is, you don't hear a real philosophical argument. You don't real in-depth argument. And I'm pretty shocked that some of you actually agree with me without having read those books. But the best I've done is gotten people to read Ayn Rand. That's what I consider an achievement. And then they make the choice about whether to agree with her or not. All right, Gail, how was your arrival at the airport? Oh, arrival at the airport in Israel? How was security at the airport upon arrival? None. I mean, I've got an Israeli passport. Got off the plane, scanned my passport at one of those machines, and in I went. So, I mean, Israeli security at airports is there, intense, but subtle. It's not about interrogating. It's not about, they're watching. They're watching. They've got cameras, and they've got experts, and they're watching you. And they know who to go after. And so you don't feel it. And generally, I'll say this, there's a subdued mood in Israel. It definitely strikes me as quieter than when I've been here in the past, post-October 7th, right? But there's also a normalcy to it. People at the beach today, people in the mall, people shopping, people eating at restaurants. Even though their sons, their nephews, their husbands might be in Gaza, might be at the front, people continue their lives. I mean, the Israelis are an incredibly strong people, and they've been through a lot over several generations now. And, it's pretty incredible. I mean, in most other countries, there'd be complete panic and hysteria and strife. And now there is a lot of strife, political strife, unfortunately, and that is horrible. But it's more normal than I expected it to be. More normal than I expected it to be. And there's a lot of signs everywhere about the hostages. A lot of people wearing yellow ribbon type things for the hostages. The big university here in Haifa has a big light thing that they make out of the light in the offices with the ribbon. There's a lot of focus on the hostages, but in many ways, again, life is much more normal than I would have expected it. Again, I'm sitting here in Haifa, easily within range of 30,000 of the Hezbollah's missiles. And, I'm on the side that faces Lebanon. My parents live on the side that faces Lebanon. The whole area here is theoretically exposed. Now, Israel has phenomenal air defense systems. And I'm sure a lot of them are arrayed around Haifa in an effort to protect Haifa. It's the most populated area in northern Israel. But, they have tens of thousands of missiles over there. Now they can't shoot them all at once and everything. But, under this threat, and the fact that many 18 to 21-year-olds, but also older 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds are right now battling in Gaza and could, starting tomorrow, be battling inside Lebanon. I mean, the Israelis are incredibly resilient, they're incredibly strong, and one of their strengths and one of their resilience is expressed by the fact that they continue living their lives. So security at the airport was nowhere near what you would think it would be, right? It's, I mean, this is a reality. It's much tougher as an American citizen to enter the United States as it is as an Israeli passport holder to enter Israel. America makes it very, very difficult to get into the country. Now I have the easiest path in the United States. It's not that bad. But if you don't, they ask you questions. Where have you been? Where'd you go? It's weird, the attitude Americans have. Enric says, be safe. I plan to be. Hunter. In Ominous Parallels, Peikoff shows German youth, the ideological and anti-ideological, responded to Nazism the same, because the anti-group still followed the country's dominant principles. This insight may be pessimistic on U.S. future. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to be optimistic right now about the U.S.'s future. It's very difficult to see it. I mean, I think the Ominous Parallels is a masterpiece. The dim hypothesis is a masterpiece. They have completely different methodologies. In it, they both end up in the same conclusion, that we're heading towards some kind of dictatorship. And the parallel with Nazism is very much there. I think it's still early in the United States. I don't think we're quite there yet. But yes, Nazism, once it achieved power, it attracted the left, it attracted Catholics, Catholic youth, it attracted the Protestants, it attracted a lot of people who, if you'd asked them 3 years earlier, they would have said, oh no, Nazis? They're horrible. I don't support the Nazis. I want nothing to do with the Nazis. But once they attained power, and Hitler started talking about German greatness and implementing changes and all, people came around and fell in love with him. And not all Germans were Nazis, but a lot of Germans were. Not all Germans supported Hitler, but I'd say by the late 1930s, probably an overwhelming majority of Germans supported Hitler. Not all Germans were complicit with the Holocaust, but many, many, many of them were, and most of them knew it was going on and did nothing to stop it. It's spooky, and they worshipped him. They worshipped Hitler. Hitler wasn't some unlike dictator that that got there. I don't think people worshipped Stalin outside of the kind of the maybe the young communists. I think most regular people in Russia, well, maybe they did. Maybe I'm underestimating. But there's a certain personality worship. And you're seeing personality worship in America today. And that's what's scary. So, yeah, I think it's very easy to be pessimistic about America. Lucinda asks, do you like pickles, Yaron? I love them, but my girlfriend can't stand them. I'm with you, Lucinda. I love pickles, but pickles are clearly a dividing line. It's one of those issues where you have to agree to disagree. Here's a good example of an issue that has no moral bearing, has no intellectual bearing. Some people like pickles, some people don't like pickles. The people who don't like pickles really don't like pickles, and the people who like them usually really like them. And what are you going to do? You're going to agree to disagree and go on. Some of us eating pickles and others avoiding them, like the plague. And everything's fine. So again, these generalizations about things like agree to disagree, No, I mean, I think you have to think about concrete examples. And I think pickles is a good example. I don't know if you meant this, Lucinda, in that context, but disagreeing about pickles is good. I'm on the thumbs up for pickles. I like pickles. And I like pickled stuff generally. Soupy cask. Is it true Steiner's egoism was anarchistic and anti-private property? If so, why do objectivists use the term egoist? Well, because it's a good term. It's about the egoism. And I think, I don't know if Aristotle used the term egoist, but Aristotle's morality is considered an egoistic morality. So it's not just objectivist. Steiner's egoism was wrong. Doesn't mean you can't use the term. It just means Steiner was wrong in how he applied it. He thought that egoism was primarily emotionalism. It's primarily pursuing your whims and your emotions. Objectivism rejects that. Egoism is about using reason. It's about being rational. And so we think Steiner's wrong, but egoism is still a great term to define the moral focus on the ego, the primacy of the individual in morality, of the self in morality. There's no better word than egoism. And again, it's a word that's accepted in the philosophical, I think, world as not representing one point of view, Steiner's. Steiner is one person who had a view about what egoism is. But Aristotle had a different view, and Ayn Rand has a different view, and they might dismiss the whole field of egoism, but there's no one view of egoism. I think there's one right view of egoism, but there's not one view of egoism. Simon says, what do you say to someone who says that because it's impossible to always be consistent, the application of the law of logic can be ignored sometimes? I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? So it's very difficult to be consistent always. Maybe it's impossible, all right? Let's say it's impossible. The laws of logic help you be as consistent as possible, right? It's the best thing you can. So, what is the alternative? So I can't be consistent all the time, so I'm going to drop logic so that I'm less consistent. Logic is what helps you be consistent. So sometimes you screw up, okay, but don't dump the thing that helps you actually be consistent. Hunter again. Hunter, the idea that youth who reject ideology don't realize that they still hold ideas now soaked up by default, is what scares me. You have spoken on this, and obviously so has Rand, but I think so many still don't get it. Yes, I mean, everybody in the world is driven by some kind of ideas. Most have no clue. They just absorb them from the culture. They just absorb them from the world. And from their teachers, preachers, rabbis, parents. And they never question. And they never make them their own. And those premises that they have adopted, many of them from their teachers and from the culture, could lead them to really, really bad things in the end, without them even realizing that that's where they're heading until they get there. And even then, they don't always realize it until sometimes it's too late. So, yes, I mean, the Kantian premises that the German educational system, I'd say to this day, and in the West generally, inculcates in young people, is what makes them susceptible to the demagogues of the world. It's what makes them susceptible to irrational ideas, because Kant, in a sense, undermines the very nature of rationality. But yes, the people walk around with ticking time bombs, ideas that they don't even know they have. And it just takes the right person to capitalize on that and to get at it. All right, Robert says, I don't know if Michael is convinced. Perhaps Yaron and Michael are going to have to agree to disagree about agree to disagree. I don't know. I think I convinced Michael. We'll find out. Maybe Michael will respond. Andrew, if you can't let go of an argument and you find yourself obsessed, you should examine why another person's opinion is so important to you. Yes. That is, if you're obsessed with arguing with person X, you can't let go, and you keep going back to it, then I think it is true. Why is that person's agreement with you so important to you? What is it about it? And I think that's an important question to ask yourself psychologically. All right, looks like here's another breaking story, related story. Israel's opposition leader, Yair Lapid, who is currently visiting Washington, D.C. and meeting with several U.S. senior officials, including former President Barack Obama, will immediately return to Israel following today's pager attack against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant is currently holding an operational assessment of the ongoing situation in the north alongside Chief of Staff, General Staff, and other senior military and defense leaders at the Underground Command and Control Center located at the IDF headquarters in Tel Aviv. I was in that underground compound, but a very old version of it from the 1980s. In the 1980s, I was there during another war in Lebanon. I mean, lest I remind you that I've been to Lebanon, so I used to know Lebanon quite well. The Iraqi-Iranian-backed paramilitary group Kataib Hezbollah has announced that they are willing to send fighters, equipment, and support to Hezbollah in Lebanon, following today's pager attack by Israel, which resulted in 4,000 Hezbollah members to be injured. I'm not sure that's a big help. Yeah, I mean, again, this is speculation. In case of full-blown war between Israel and Hezbollah, Israel would try to keep the war restricted to the south, while also steering clear of Lebanese armed forces. Yes, I mean, ultimately, what Israel would like is the Lebanese armed forces to, control Hezbollah. I'm not sure they have the military capability of doing that. Hezbollah will prefer the war to be expanded to all of Lebanon, so that the Lebanese armed forces end up joining the war against Israel. In short, it is Israel's interest to not fight Lebanon, but only Hezbollah. But it is Hezbollah's interest to drag the whole of Lebanon into the war with Israel. True, I don't think it makes that big of a difference. It's not like the Lebanese armed forces are a significant force. They're just not. They're not. They don't have a significant force. Latest, 36 minutes ago, the Lebanese Health Ministry now says that 11 were killed and over 4,000 wounded, including 400 critically during today's pager attack. It's just the numbers are mind-boggling. It really is hard to really, the impact of this and the significance of this and just the achievement, the strategic and intelligence achievement here is mind-boggling. The Saudi news agency, Al-Hadath, is reporting that upward of 500 members of Hezbollah may have been blinded or suffered serious injuries to their eyes as a result of today's pager attack by Israel. That takes 500 relatively senior members of Hezbollah out of commission. That's when you want to take advantage of your advantage and finish them off, in a sense, or at least achieve your strategic goal, which is to get them, move them north, push them north. All right. Andrew says, if you can't, oh, no, we already answered that. All right. Cool. Thank you, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. For those who are listening, not live, please consider supporting the show. Patreon, Yaron Brook Show. Couldn't do the show without support from Patreon and PayPal, yaronbrookShow.com/members. Membership. Members. And you can also become a member here on the show. And yeah, there are lots of ways in which to support the Yaron Brook Show. Please consider doing so. And hope you enjoyed the show today. Found it interesting. I don't know if enjoy is the right word, but found it interesting at least. And I'm not sure when I'll see you again. I'm going to try to do more shows this week from Israel. And keep you updated on my thoughts on what's going on over here. And I will see you all later. Thank you, guys. I'm going to go to sleep because it's 11:30 p.m. here. And I will probably talk to you tomorrow. If not, later in the week. But I will try to do as many shows as I can in the next couple of weeks. Bye, everybody. Have a great